Well, what it would do is it would take the remaining space, and Mike and the buttons would then share 50% if I put one on each one of those.
So if you wanted to subdivide things in thirds or halves, you could have a container of 2 with the first one being a container of 3, the second one being a container of 4, and it would distribute its own weights proportionally.
Correct.
Does that scale have to be ahead of your value? Or can it be decimal point?
It's a double, I believe, so you can do like 0.25. Let's see. Okay. So let's talk relative layout. So the relative layout, views specify their position relative to either the parent or within themselves or each other. So in this case, I've got a relative layout. I've got a text view on the top, the first one, and I'm going to tell it, align yourself to the top of your parent. So that means push it up to the top. The next one down, I'm going to tell it, hey, put yourself below the ID, the layout that's named, or with the ID of hello, which, as you can see in this first one, maybe it's easier just to walk over here. So this first one, I've got the ID as hello. In the second one, I'm going to place myself below this element. So essentially, we're recreating the linear layout just to kind of illustrate that you can sometimes do more than one thing with each one of them. So why is this useful? Well, first of all, it's extremely versatile, even more so than the linear layout. It scales very well, and it handles rotation very easily. So what I mean by that is when your user takes their phone, turns it on its side, the view gets redrawn. If you do your relative layout correctly, things will still fall into place where you expect them to go. So let's take a look. So first, I just need to go into my activity here. My layout activity that is, basically showing what our view is. I've got a helper method that sets up which view we're looking at. So I'm going to tell it, rather than show us the linear view, which is already defined, we're going to just show it the relative view instead. So let's take a look at the relative view, or the relative layout view. Excuse me, so you can see that I've just dropped a relative layout in here. We're going to drop on the title. We're going to place it at the top of the parent. Excuse me, right click by accident. So we're going to place it at the top of the parent, and we're going to center it horizontally. Then underneath that, or below the title item, we're going to place our view type, which is going to say relative layout, and we're going to center that as well. So let's start by looking at that. Now the hope is that this will show just like our linear layout did, and it'll look exactly the same. There we go. Happiness. So next up, let's elaborate on that a little bit. We're going to place a couple of buttons. Now in the linear layout, what we did is we had to nest the views a little bit. With the relative layout, you don't necessarily have to do that. You can if you want to, but you don't necessarily have to. So I'm just going to drop my buttons on themselves. We're going to tell them, align yourselves to the bottom. For one of the buttons, we're going to push it all the way over to the left, and then we're going to tell the other one to also align to the bottom, but push yourself over to the right. Show progress. So take a look at our layout. And so we can see we've got our two text views at the top. We've got our relative button is all the way at the bottom, pushed over to the left. We've got our linear button all the way at the bottom, pushed over to the right. And actually, while we're sitting here, you might want to write this down. If you want to rotate the view in the emulator, Control F12. It took me a while to find that. So note that I've now rotated the view. Our buttons are still all the way at the bottom, and they're still pushed over to the sides as they're supposed to be.